Imagine a vast plain, bathed in the glow of a blood-red sunset. In shadowed tents, whispers and secret handshakes are forging the fate of nations. Empires, those colossal architects of history, rarely rise on the clamor of battle alone. Instead, they ascend through the subtle, often unseen art of hidden alliances, secret pacts that bind enemies as allies and turn potential foes into instruments of unimaginable power. From the wind-swept steppes of Asia to the sun-baked valleys of Mexico, these covert bonds have woven the very tapestry of dominance. Blending cunning diplomacy with raw, unbridled ambition. But what truly drives these shadowy unions? How do they manage to propel mere kingdoms, sometimes weak and isolated, into imperial glory? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on history's most powerful secret handshakes. To understand this, we must journey back to the cradle of one of the world's greatest conquests. Picture the Mongolian steppes in the 13th century. A young warrior named Temujin faces betrayal and exile. Orphaned and abandoned by his own clan, he could have easily faded into obscurity, another forgotten soul lost to the harsh wilderness. Temujin had a different plan. He possessed something more valuable than an army, the memory of an old bond. He sought out Togrul, the mighty Khan of the powerful Karaite tribe. He didn't come with an army, but with a story and a symbol. He invoked Ananda, a sacred blood oath his father had sworn with Togrul years before. As a tribute, he presented a precious gift, a cloak of black sable fur, the only valuable possession he had left. This gesture was more than just a plea for help. It was a strategic move. He was reminding Togrul of a debt of honor. The gambit paid off. Togrul, moved by the appeal to his past loyalty, agreed to help. He granted Temujin command of an army of 20,000 warriors. This wasn't just a friendly favor. It was a calculated merger of strengths. Togrul saw a chance to expand his own influence through this promising young warrior. With this newfound power, Temujin rallied his own followers and launched a daring raid to rescue his kidnapped wife, Bert, crushing the rival Merkit tribe in the process. This single alliance catapulted him from a fugitive to a formidable leader. But Temujin, who would soon be known as Genghis Khan, was just getting started. He understood that alliances were tools to be forged, used, and sometimes discarded. He briefly allied with his childhood friend and blood brother, Jamuka. Together, they were an unstoppable force. But as their power grew, so did their rivalry. When their ambitions inevitably clashed, Temujin didn't hesitate. He outmaneuvered Jamuka, using his deep understanding of tribal politics to turn Jamuka's own commanders against him. Genghis Khan's genius wasn't just in winning battles, but in what he did after. When he conquered a tribe, he didn't just absorb them. He shattered their old structures. He would disperse the conquered clans among his own loyal Mongol units, erasing old loyalties and forging a new, unified identity. A warrior's allegiance was no longer to his clan, but to Genghis Khan himself. This created an incredibly disciplined and cohesive fighting force, unlike anything the world had ever seen. These ever-shifting pacts and strategic integrations allowed him to strike powerful enemies, like the Jin dynasty in northern China, from completely unexpected angles. He would form a temporary alliance with one nomadic group to attack a flank, then use the tribute and troops gained from that victory to fuel his next campaign. It was a brilliant, exponential growth strategy. By 1206, at a great assembly, or Kurultai, by the river Annan, the once exiled outcast was proclaimed Genghis Khan, the universal ruler of all the steppe peoples. The Mongol Empire was born a behemoth that would eventually stretch from the Pacific Ocean to the heart of Europe. It was an empire built not just on the strength of its cavalry, but on the foundation of secret handshakes, temporary truces, and alliances that multiplied its might beyond measure. Now, let's travel halfway across the world and thousands of miles south to the heart of Mesoamerica. Here in the Valley of Mexico, a remarkably similar drama was unfolding. In the 1300s, a wandering people known as the Mexica arrived in the valley. They were outsiders, seen as uncivilized latecomers. Following a divine prophecy, they built their city, Tenochtitlan, on a marshy island in the middle of Lake Texcoco. It was a difficult, unpromising location. For years, the Mexica were weak and vulnerable, forced to pay tribute to the dominant power in the region, the Tapaneks of the city-state of Azcapotzalco. They were essentially a vassal state, their destiny seemingly tied to the whims of their powerful overlords. They seemed destined for a future of perpetual subjugation, a minor player in a much larger game. But in the year 1426, the political landscape was thrown into chaos. The powerful ruler of Azcapotzalco died, triggering a succession crisis. His sons vied for control, and the once mighty empire began to fracture from within. Its Caudal, the newly ascended ruler of the Mexica and Tenochtitlan, saw a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He knew he couldn't challenge the Tepaneks alone, so he reached out. He forged a secret military pact with two other subordinate city-states that also resented Tepanek rule, Texcoco and Tlacopan. These were not the most powerful cities in the valley, but they shared a common enemy and a burning desire for freedom. This was the birth of the legendary Triple Alliance. This covert coalition, a union of the marginalized, was a direct challenge to the established order. Together they launched a coordinated rebellion. War was fierce, but their combined strength was enough. In a stunning turn of events, they toppled the city of Azcapotzalco, bringing the Tepanek Empire crashing down. The balance of power in the Valley of Mexico was shattered forever. What followed was a period of explosive expansion. The Triple Alliance didn't just stop with defeating their old master, they used their newfound collective power to intimidate their neighbors. They sent emissaries demanding that other city-states join their alliance and pay tribute or face annihilation. Most chose to submit. This tribute system fueled their growth. Gold, textiles, exotic feathers, food, and most importantly, warriors flowed into the capitals of the alliance. While it was an alliance of three, it wasn't a union of equals. Tenochtitlan, with its strategic island location and aggressive Mexica warriors, quickly emerged as the senior partner. The spoils of war were divided, but Tenochtitlan took the lion's share. The markets of the city swelled with the riches of a rapidly expanding empire. However, these bonds also had a much darker side. The Mexica-dominated alliance maintained control not just through military might, but through psychological warfare. They demanded a different kind of tribute, human lives for sacrifice. This practice served a dual purpose. Religiously, it was meant to appease their gods. Politically, it was an instrument of pure terror. By forcing their subject peoples to witness these brutal ceremonies, they bound them in fear, ensuring loyalty through a constant, visceral reminder of the price of rebellion. The Aztec Empire, as it became known to history, was not a single unified state, but a vast network of tribute-paying city-states, all held together by the military and political dominance of the Triple Alliance. Its power was rooted in this hidden triad, a secret pact that turned division into dominion and transformed a band of island-dwelling wanderers into the masters of Mesoamerica. From the nomadic hordes of Mongolia to the island city of Tenochtitlan, the story is the same. The path to empire is paved with more than just swords and stone. It's built on secret promises, strategic partnerships, and the quiet, calculated handshakes that happen in the shadows, long before the first arrow is ever fired. These alliances are the hidden engine of history, proving that sometimes the most powerful weapon is not who you can defeat, but who you can convince to fight alongside you. How do empires really rise? Is it all just epic battles and conquering heroes? Not quite. The real secret, the hidden engine behind some of history's greatest empires, is something far more subtle: the art of the deal. It's about forging alliances, not just on the battlefield but in the shadows, through quiet promises and clever manipulations. Today we're pulling back the curtain on three legendary empires, the Romans, the Ottomans, and the British, to reveal how their power was built, not just on swords, but on handshakes. Let's start our journey in ancient Rome. Long before the Colosseum echoed with cheers for gladiators, the Roman Republic was a small player in a tough neighborhood. They weren't just marching their legions across Italy, they were weaving a complex web of strategic pacts. Around the 3rd century BC, Rome began to dominate its neighbors. But here's the clever part. It wasn't always through brute force. They offered something irresistible: a stake in the Roman project. They'd grant partial citizenship or sign special treaties. This meant allied cities and tribes were integrated into Rome's world. They shared in the spoils of war, but they also shared the burdens, providing soldiers for Rome's armies. It was a brilliant system that turned potential enemies into partners. Think of it like a business merger where everyone gets a piece of the pie, but Rome always holds the majority shares. A classic example of this is the Second Punic War. After Hannibal and his elephants ravaged Italy, Rome was on its knees. But they didn't just fight back with their own soldiers. They made a crucial alliance with a North African king named Massinissa of Numidia. After the decisive Battle of Zama in 202 BC, where Hannibal was finally defeated, Rome rewarded Massinissa handsomely. He was given territory that bordered Rome's old rival, Carthage. This is where the quiet manipulation comes in. Over the next few decades, Massinissa constantly nibbled away at Carthaginian land. Whenever Carthage complained, Rome would step in to mediate, but they almost always sided with their ally, Massinissa. This hidden favoritism wasn't just about loyalty. It was a strategy. It created constant friction and gave Rome the perfect excuses to interfere, eventually leading to the Third Punic War and the complete destruction of Carthage. In 146 BC, Rome didn't just defeat its enemy, it used an ally to provoke them into a final, fatal conflict. This pattern repeated itself elsewhere. Up in the Po Valley of northern Italy, the powerful Boii tribe was causing trouble. But instead of a long, costly war, Rome found a weakness. In 192 BC, under immense pressure, a faction within the Boii defected. They turned against their own people, sided with Rome, and essentially opened the door for Roman colonization of the region. These pacts weren't announced with trumpets and parades. They were the quiet, behind-the-scenes maneuvers that secured Rome's borders, gathered vital intelligence from local sources, and, most importantly, bolstered their legions with thousands of auxiliary troops from their allies. The sprawling Roman Empire that would one day encircle the Mediterranean was built on these unseen bridges of power, one shrewd alliance at a time. Now, let's journey across time and space. The sands of Anatolia in the 14th century, where a new power was about to explode onto the world stage, the Ottoman Turks. They started small, really small. Osman I carved out a tiny principality, just one of many in a fractured region. So how did this small state become a world-spanning empire? Again, it was all about alliances. Osman's successors were masters of political maneuvering. His son Orhan made a game-changing deal with the Byzantine Emperor John VI Cantacazenus. The Byzantine Empire was tearing itself apart in a civil war, and John needed help. Orhan agreed to support him. In exchange, he got two things: marriage to the emperor's daughter, Theodora, and crucially, the right to raid Byzantine lands in Thrace, on the European continent. This pact was a masterstroke. It gave the Ottomans their first permanent foothold in Europe, leapfrogging over their Turkish rivals who were still stuck in Anatolia, but hidden within this alliance was pure pragmatism. Orhan wasn't just relying on his own warriors. He started hiring Christian mercenaries, which made him less dependent on his own unpredictable nomadic troops. This stable military force allowed him to capture key cities like Iznik and Izmit, solidifying his power base. The Ottomans also developed an incredibly unique system that blurred the lines between conquest and alliance, the Devshirme. They would conscript young Christian boys from their conquered territories in the Balkans. These boys were converted to Islam, educated, and trained to become the Sultan's personal elite soldiers, the Janissaries. They had no family ties, no regional loyalties. Their only allegiance was to the Sultan himself. In a way, it was a forced alliance, creating a fiercely loyal fighting force from the very people they had conquered. As the empire expanded under leaders like Murad I, this strategy evolved into a system of vassalage. Instead of trying to directly rule every piece of land, they would allow local European rulers in places like Serbia and Bulgaria to keep their thrones. All they had to do was pay an annual tribute and, most importantly, provide troops for the Ottoman army. This allowed the Ottomans to control vast territories without the headache of direct administration. And these allied troops were decisive. At the Battle of Chernomen in 1371 and the legendary Battle of Kosovo in 1389. It was these combined forces, atonement regulars alongside their Christian vassals, that crushed powerful European coalitions. The alliances didn't just win battles, they absorbed entire kingdoms into the Ottoman sphere of influence. Finally, the Ottomans sealed their multicultural empire with another brilliant social contract, the millet system. They granted religious and legal autonomy to non-Muslim communities, like Jews and Orthodox Christians. These communities could govern themselves according to their own laws, as long as they remained loyal to the Sultan. This didn't just prevent rebellion, it actively attracted skilled people from all over, stabilizing the realm and enriching its culture. From a small Turkish state, the Ottomans built a continent-spanning empire, not just through conquest, but through these covert integrations and cross-cultural bonds. Let's fast forward one last time to a very different scene. The hot, humid deltas of Bengal in the year 1757. Here, our third empire builder wasn't a king or a sultan, but a corporation, the British East India Company. They started as simple traders, but as the powerful Mughal Empire in India began to crumble, they saw an opportunity for something much bigger. The stage was set at the Battle of Plassey. On one side stood Robert Clive, leading a tiny force of about 3,000 company soldiers. On the other, the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dowlah, with a colossal army of 50,000 men. The odds were impossible. A straight-up fight would have been a slaughter, but Clive wasn't planning on a fair fight. He was planning a betrayal. His secret weapon wasn't a new type of cannon. It was a man named Mir Jafar, one of the Nawab's most powerful commanders. Clive forged a secret pact with him, promising to make him the new Nawab of Bengal if he helped the British win. But the conspiracy didn't stop there. The Jagat Seths, the most powerful bankers in Bengal, were also brought into the fold. They feared that the unpredictable Nawab would disrupt their business, so they quietly financed the British plot. On the day of the battle, fate intervened. A sudden monsoon downpour soaked the Nawab's gunpowder, rendering much of his ammunition useless. But the British had protected theirs. As the battle commenced, the real move was made. Mir Jafar, who commanded a huge portion of the Nawab's army, did absolutely nothing. He held his troops back, deliberately exposing a flank of the loyalist forces. Seeing this opening, the disciplined British troops and their superior artillery tore into the disorganized and confused army. The massive force panicked and routed. Siraj-ud-Dowlah fled the battlefield, but was soon captured and executed. Just as promised, the British installed Mir Jafar as the new puppet Nawab. In return, he ceded vast territories and wealth to the East India Company. The Battle of Plassey wasn't won by military genius alone. It was won by a conspiracy. This secret alliance marked the pivotal moment when the British shifted from a trading company to a conquering power in India. The immense wealth they gained from Bengal funded further campaigns, like the decisive Battle of Buxar in 1764, which cemented their control. From there, they perfected their model of empire building through alliance. They rolled out a system of subsidiary treaties with hundreds of Indian princes. The deal was simple. The local ruler would pay for British troops to be stationed in their territory, ostensibly for protection. In reality, it made them completely dependent on the British, who could then dictate policy and control the state from behind the scenes. It was a protection racket on an imperial scale. Through this web of treaties, betrayals, and puppet rulers, a British trading company, headquartered thousands of miles away in London, managed to weave a vast and powerful empire across the entire Indian subcontinent. From the legions of Rome to the janissaries of the Ottoman Sultan and the redcoats of the East India Company, the story is surprisingly similar. The greatest empires in history weren't just built on the strength of their armies, but on the cleverness of their diplomacy. The secrecy of their deals and their uncanny ability to turn enemies into allies and allies into instruments of power. Have you ever wondered what the secret ingredient is for building an empire? You often think of legendary conquerors, unstoppable armies, and decisive battles. But what if the real power wasn't forged on the battlefield, but in the quiet, shadowy world of diplomacy and deal-making? What if the most potent weapon in history wasn't a sword, but a handshake? Today, we're pulling back the curtain to reveal the hidden architecture of power, alliances. These are the pacts, promises, and partnerships that have built, sustained, and ultimately destroyed the greatest empires the world has ever known. This isn't just about friends helping friends. It's a calculated game of strategy, where empires amplify their strength, divide their enemies, and gain the legitimacy they need to rule. Let's start with the economics. Building an empire is expensive. You need soldiers, supplies, and a steady stream of wealth. Alliances are the ultimate financial shortcut. Take the Mongols. Their legendary cavalry was unstoppable, but they didn't conquer the vast Eurasian steppe alone. By forging alliances with nomadic tribes, they gained not just more warriors, but crucial resources. Thousands of fresh horses and expert scouts who knew the terrain like the back of their hand. This wasn't just a military boost. It was a logistical masterpiece that fueled their rapid expansion. Similarly, the Ottoman Empire built its vast domain not just through conquest, but through clever administration of its allied and vassal states. Instead of simply crushing everyone, they often offered local rulers a deal: pledge loyalty, pay tribute, and you can keep a degree of autonomy. This system brought in a steady flow of taxes, raw materials, and skilled artisans, enriching the heart of the empire in Istanbul without the constant cost of military occupation. Perhaps the most striking example is the British Empire in India. The Battle of Plassey in 1757 is often seen as the beginning of British dominance. But it wasn't just a military victory. It was a victory of alliances. The British East India Company, led by Robert Clive, made a secret pact with Mir Jafar, a disgruntled commander in the army of the Nawab of Bengal. In exchange for the throne, Mir Jafar agreed to betray his leader. The battle was won before it even began. The result: the British gained control of Bengal's immense tax revenues, a treasure chest that would fund their expansion across India and eventually their global dominance. This wasn't just a battle, it was a hostile takeover, financed by an inside deal. But alliances are more than just about money and resources. They're a geopolitical masterstroke, a tool for playing your enemies against each other. The ancient Romans were masters of this game. Their famous motto, divide and conquer, wasn't just a saying. It was their foreign policy. When facing their great rival, Carthage in North Africa, Rome didn't just rely on its legions. They cultivated an alliance with the Numidians, a neighboring kingdom that had its own grievances with the Carthaginians. The Numidian cavalry, famous for its speed and skill, became a thorn in Carthage's side, harassing their supply lines and providing critical support in major battles. Rome effectively outsourced part of the war, letting local rivalries do the heavy lifting. Fast forward over 1,000 years to the Americas, and we see the exact same strategy at play. When the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés arrived in Mexico in 1519 with just a few hundred men, he faced the mighty Aztec Empire, a civilization of millions with its magnificent capital, Tenochtitlan. On paper, it was an impossible fight, but Cortés discovered the empire's fatal weakness. It was built on the subjugation of other peoples. The Aztecs demanded heavy tribute and a constant supply of captives for their human sacrifices. This created deep-seated resentment among their neighbors, especially the powerful Tlaxcalans. The Tlaxcalans had fiercely resisted Aztec rule for generations. When Cortés appeared, they saw not a conqueror, but a potential liberator. They saw an opportunity to finally break the Aztec yoke. After some initial clashes, a powerful alliance was formed. The Tlaxcalans provided Cortés with tens of thousands of elite warriors, guides who knew the land, and vital supplies. They became the bulk of his army. The siege of Tenochtitlan in 1521 wasn't a Spanish conquest. It was a massive uprising of indigenous peoples, led by a small group of Spaniards. While a devastating smallpox epidemic, unintentionally introduced by the Europeans, ravaged the city's defenders. It was the Tlaxcalan warriors who overwhelmed Montezuma's forces on the ground. The Aztec Empire wasn't toppled by a few hundred conquistadors. It was torn apart by the very divisions it had created, expertly exploited by an outsider. This pattern reveals a profound truth. Empires rise by leveraging the cracks in the existing order. They find the resentful, the ambitious, and the oppressed, and they offer them a better deal. But this strategy is a double-edged sword. The bonds forged in the shadows of ambition are inherently fragile. The same self-interest that creates an alliance can just as easily break it. Trail is always lurking just beneath the surface. When the strain becomes too great, when interests diverge, or when one partner becomes too powerful, these pacts can fracture spectacularly. The history of empires is littered with the wreckage of broken alliances, where yesterday's trusted partner becomes tomorrow's bitter enemy. Think of the internal power struggles that weakened the Ottoman Empire from within. Or how the very subjects who helped build an empire can be the first to rebel when they feel the deal is no longer in their favor. And don't think for a second that this is all ancient history. The echoes of this imperial playbook resonate all around us today. We see it in modern economic blocs and strategic partnerships that shape global influence. The European Union, for example, is a grand experiment in binding former rivals together through economic and political alliance, turning centuries of conflict into cooperation. In Asia and Africa, new trade deals and infrastructure projects often mask geopolitical power plays. With nations vying for influence by offering partnerships and investments, these are the modern-day equivalents of the handshakes that built Rome and toppled the Aztecs. They are battles for influence fought not with armies but with contracts, loans, and treaties. But history offers a stark warning. Empires built on these hidden handshakes, on a foundation of fragile trust and shifting loyalties, are often living on borrowed time. When that trust erodes, when the balance of power shifts, the entire structure can crumble. The very pacts that created dominance become the seeds of its destruction. The Aztecs learned this when their tributaries turned against them. The Ottomans learned this as their vassal states broke away one by one. So, what is the ultimate lesson from the rise and fall of these great empires? It's that power is rarely seized in isolation. It is crafted, negotiated, and won in the shadows, where ambition meets opportunity and enemies become friends, however temporarily. The story of empire is a story of relationships, of promises kept and promises broken. These alliances are the invisible threads that weave the tapestry of history, but they are as fragile as whispers. They remind us that all power, no matter how absolute it seems, is transient. Dominance is a temporary state, always vulnerable to the very pacts that birthed it. The handshake that builds an empire can just as easily be the one that brings it to its knees. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through the hidden world of imperial alliances. If you found this fascinating, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the forces that shape our world. Let us know in the comments which historical alliance you find most intriguing. We'll see you in the next one.